Good morning and happy Thursday. I am in my office, not showing my bookshelves because they're not yet cleaned off, but that is a commitment I am making, and I want to celebrate the Cubs' first two victories over the Cardinals, especially since I get a lot of grief from Cardinal fans if they beat the Cubs. So we are continuing our move through the letter to the Hebrews. We're on the slow boat to China, but that's okay. We're in no hurry, and I'm trying to pull out some of the nuanced pieces there. So by way of general review, this is a letter. We don't know who wrote it in the 60s. It's written to a Jewish audience, Jews who are in a particular crisis. We're not sure what it is. We'll look at that in chapter 4. And the first chapter is all about Jesus and how he's bigger and better than everyone else. And then in chapter 2, we get introduced to the argument that is going to be made. If Jesus is who he claims to be and he's so much better than everyone else, why are we not more zealously following him? And then I've noted that there are all these counterpoints and subpoints and these arguments and tangents that the writer goes on. And we've looked a little bit at the idea of suffering, the suffering of Christ, and the call that we might face to suffer and how that can be purifying and an advancement possibility. And then yesterday we started a little bit more of a deeper dive last few days on the Incarnation, the idea that Jesus became one of us. And this is Hebrews chapter 2, starting with verses 10 and going through much of the rest of the chapter. I think the Incarnation is an underappreciated miracle, and it's an underappreciated act of humility on the part of Christ, that he would humble himself, the creator, to become part of the creation. I've heard people say, it's sort of like, if we became an ant. Except it's actually nothing like that at all. God, I'm not the creator of the ant. I couldn't make an ant if you gave me all the pieces, right? I mean, there's no relationship between me and an ant, between God and us. God is the creator, and he enters time and space in an act of deep humiliation. And he does this to be our sacrifice. So I've been in the sermons as we're moving through this summer. I've been talking about this. Jesus is the true and better, Adam and the true and better Abraham and the true and better Isaac and the true and better. Jesus is the true and better prophet. He's the true and better priest. He's the true and better sacrifice. So he is the Paschal Lamb, and he will make those claims, but he's the true and better sacrifice in the Incarnation. He is God, but he is one of us, and he can perfectly represent us. So I just want to be clear that when we're talking about the Incarnation, the idea is that Jesus is fully God and fully man. He was fully God from before time began. At the Incarnation, he adds humanity to deity, and he remains fully human today in heaven, seated at the right hand of God the Father. He's not half God and half man. He's not a God who looks like man. He's not a man who acts like God. He's not God who becomes a man and stops being God. He's not God part of the time and man some of the time. The hypostatic union, the idea that Jesus is one person with two natures, as opposed to the Trinity, in which God is one God in three persons. The hypostatic union is that Jesus is one person with two natures, fully God and fully man. And this means there's a handful of ways that we can get Jesus wrong. I mean, the most common one is unbelief. I mentioned yesterday the doceto, part of the Gnosticism, this idea that Jesus just looks like a person, but he was a phantom. He wasn't really fully human. Another mistake people make is they think that Jesus was God or Jesus was a man, and then he lived a perfect life, and so God adopted him at a higher level. Paul of Samosata, this was an early church heresy. Modalism says that there's really no distinction between God the Father and God the Son. It sort of messes up the Trinity. He sort of moves between being God the Father, and he becomes God the Son, and he becomes God the Holy Spirit. Arianism is the big one. It is the belief that Jesus is somehow slightly less than the Father. He's the vice president of heaven, but he's not equal in value or eternality or other things with God the Father. There's others as well, but I want you, again, the point of Hebrews is to marvel at Jesus. And there's so many different ways to just marvel at Jesus. He is bigger, more amazing, more humble, more glorious than we can possibly imagine. And we need to keep right-sizing our understanding of Jesus. Changes everything. So, right-size Jesus the best you can today. Have a good day.